In 1997, the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry announced that element number 106 would be named after Dr. Glenn Seaborg, making him the first person to have an element named after him while he was still alive. Dr. Seaborg conducted a great deal of his work at the University of California in Berkeley, which itself has an element named after it, berkelium. The town of Berkeley is in California, after which californium is named, and California itself is in America, from which americium was named. How many of these sorts of chains do you think exist? Well, while Glenn Seaborg was working in Berkeley in the 1950s, Ernest Lawrence, of Lawrencium fame, was founding a lab in Livermore, California, after which Livermorium gets its name. Recently, Tennessine was named after the state of Tennessee, named so because of Oak Ridge National Labs, where Enrico Fermi, after whom fermium was named, worked during the Manhattan Project. I'm sure my Italian friends don't approve of me putting Enrico Fermi under the category of Americans, but he did die an American citizen, although he was born and spent much of his life in Italy. Speaking of Italy, the continent of America was named after Amerigo Vespucci, an Italian cartographer. But because there's no element named after the nation of Italy, this is where both of these will have to stay while I'm making my video. In this video, I will explore every element named after a person or a place. Together, these elements' names tell an interesting story molded by brilliant minds, ambitious countries, and centuries of hard work studying the structure of the world in a laboratory. Countless Japanese scientists have worked towards discovering new elements. One notable example is Masataka Ogawa, who had first isolated element number 75, for which he proposed the name Nipponium after his home country of Japan. Although the element was eventually named rhenium, this name was given a reprise in 2017 when element number 113 was named Nihonium as an homage to his work and to celebrate the country for its many contributions to science. Indium was named by Ferdinand Reich and Hieronymus Richter after the indigo color line in the emission spectrum. The color indigo is named for the blue dye, which is named for the country from which the blue dye originated, India. The majority of other elements named after places and people are from Europe, which, quite naturally, has the element europium named after it. We begin this tour in France, which oddly enough has two elements named after it, francium, obviously, but also gallium, which is named for the old name for the region, Gaul. You might not guess it, but Paris has an element named after it as well, lutetium, which is named for the old Roman name for the city, Lutetium Parisorum. Curium is of course named for two of the most famous French chemists, Marie and Pierre Curie. The astute will note that Marie Curie was born Marie Sklodowska in Poland, after which she named the element polonium. Moving east of France, what story about scientific history would be complete without everyone's favorite scientific celebrity, Einstein, after whom Einsteinium was named? Einstein was born in Ulm in the Kingdom of Württemberg, which is now in the Republic of Germany, after which germanium was named. Lise Meitner, who pioneered the field of nuclear physics and chemistry and also worked to discover nuclear fission, did the majority of her innovative research in Germany. Although she missed out on a Nobel Prize for her research, which was instead awarded to her colleague Otto Hahn, she was eventually given a far rarer honor when element number 109 was named meitnerium in her honor. Wilhelm Röntgen is credited with the discovery of X-rays, which have provided a very useful tool in medicine as well as in identifying new elements. Because of his contributions to chemistry and physics, when element 111 was discovered at the Helmholtz Center for Heavy Iron Research, it was named Röntgenium to celebrate his memory. The town of Darmstadt, which is the home of the Helmholtz Center, where many elements and isotopes have been synthesized, has the element Darmstadtium named after it. Darmstadt is in the state of Hesse, from which hessium draws its name. It's very close to the Rhine River, from which rhenium derives its name. We now move east in our tour. Russia has always been a titan in research in chemistry and nuclear processes, and has its fair share of elements named after people and places. We start with ruthenium, which was named after the country as a whole. Moscovium was named after the capital city of Russia, Moscow, and dubnium is named after Dubna, the home of the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research, where many elements and isotopes have been first synthesized. The founder of the joint labs in Dubna was Grigory Flerov, who was one of the first observers of spontaneous fission, and after whom the element flerovium was named. Flerovium was itself first synthesized in 1998 by a team of researchers led by Russian-Armenian scientist Yuri Oganezin, who has an element named after him, Oganezon, which was named for him in 2016, which made him the second person to be alive when an element was named after him. The second to last element on our tour of Russia is a bit of an odd one. Vasily Samarsky-Bihovets was the chief of the Russian Mining Engineering Corps in the mid-1800s, and the mineral samorsite was named after him. A few years after Vasily's death, Paul-Émile Lecoq de Boisbaldron was studying samorsite ore and, in doing so, isolated a new element, which he named samarium after the ore and the man. We end our tour of Russia with Dmitry Mendeleev, who, by all accounts, is the patron saint of chemists. Not only did he create a whole new way of organizing elements, which we now call the periodic table, he predicted the existence of many of the elements discussed here years before any of them were first discovered or synthesized. Mendelevium is justifiably named in his honor. Moving to the Mediterranean, copper is the first element known to be named after a specific location, after Cyprus, where it has been mined since antiquity. Copernicium was named after the Renaissance scientist Nicholas Copernicus. Copernicus took his name from his ancestral village of Koperniki in Poland. This town, however, may have been named for the nearby copper mines, which means that Copernicium is an element, named after a man, named after a town, named after an element, which itself was named after the island of Cyprus. If Scandinavia were a country of its own, it would hold the record for most elements named after people and places in it. Scandium is named for the region as a whole, and 3 cities have elements named after them. Hafnium is named after Hafnia, the old name for Copenhagen. And borium is named after Niels Bohr, a Copenhagen native, who pioneered research into electron orbitals and quantum theory. Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, has the element holmium named after it, and Alfred Nobel, a Stockholm native and chemist who invented dynamite, has the element nobelium named after him. Sweden is home to the small town of Ytterby. This unassuming town holds the actual record for the most elements named after a single place, with yttrium, ytterbium, erbium, and terbium all deriving their names from this one small town. Sweden's Nordic neighbor, Finland, does not have an element named after the entire country, but Johann Gadolin, a Finnish geologist, had a mineral named after him in 1800, gadolinite. In 1880, chemists studying this mineral isolated a new element in it and named it gadolinium. Because gadolinium and samarium were both named after geologists, that makes it the third most common profession to have an element named after it, after chemists and physicists. Now we get into a few oddball elements, those that are named after people and places, but which don't fit perfectly into the story I've told so far. Greece has no elements named after it, but the Magnesia region in Greece has 2 elements named after it, manganese and magnesium. Now, I know that I said physicists and chemists have the most elements named after them, but if mythological Greek figure or god was a profession, it would take the cake. There are plenty of elements named after Greek gods and mythical figures. Tantalum and niobium are named after the father-daughter duo Tantalus and Niobe, and promethium was named after the god Prometheus. Palladium was named for Pallas Athena, while helium and selenium draw their names from Helios and Selene, the god and goddess of the sun and moon respectively. Cadmium was named after the first king of Thebes, Cadmus, and thulium was named for the country of Thule in Greek mythology, home of Prince Valiant. But, depending on where it may also be referring to Scandinavia. Britain has contributed a great deal to scientific progress, and consequently has its share of elements named after cities and scientists. Just none were named after the country as a whole. Strontium was named after Strontian, a village in Scotland, and Rutherfordium was named for the New Zealand-born scientist Ernest Rutherford. Argentina deserves an honorable mention on this list because it is named after the Latin word for silver, argentum, making Argentina the only country to be named after an element instead of the other way around. Moving into the stars, the element tellurium is named for Tellus, the Latin word for Earth, which all of these countries and people have lived on. The Earth orbits the Sun, after which helium was named. Other planets and dwarf planets in our solar system also have elements named after them. Starting from the center, we have Mercury, Cerium, Neptunium, Uranium, and Plutonium. All of these are also named after Roman gods. Just because we've filled in the bottom row of the periodic table doesn't mean there aren't new elements to discover and name. I'd love to tie up a few loose ends and name elements after Britain and Italy, as these are the only 2 countries to have citizens with elements named after them, but no elements named after the country as a whole. Of course, there are plenty of other deserving people and places to name elements after as well. Before I go, what people or places do you think deserve to have an element named after them? I'd love to hear your ideas in the comments below.